Page 59. The Analysis of Mind, by Bertrand Russell, 1921. Lecture 4. Influence of Past History on Present Occurrences in Living Organisms. 1.4. We react with the past. In this lecture we shall be concerned with a very general characteristic which broadly, though not absolutely, distinguishes the behavior of living organisms from that of dead matter. The characteristic in question is this: the response of an organism to a given stimulus is very often dependent upon the past history of the organism, and not merely upon the stimulus and the hitherto discoverable present state of the organism. This characteristic is embodied in the saying, "A burnt child fears the fire." The burn may have left no visible traces, yet it modifies the reaction of the child in the presence of fire. It is customary to assume that, in such cases, the past operates by modifying the structure of the brain, not directly. I have no wish to suggest that this hypothesis is false. I wish only to point out that it is a hypothesis. At the end of the present lecture I shall examine the grounds in its favor. If we confine ourselves to facts which have been actually observed, we must say that past occurrences, in addition to the present stimulus and the present ascertainable condition of the organism, enter into the causation of the response. The characteristic is not wholly confined to living organisms. For example, magnetized steel looks just like steel which has not been magnetized, but its behavior is in some ways different. In the case of dead matter, however, such phenomena are less frequent and important than in the case of living organisms, and it is far less difficult to invent satisfactory hypotheses as to the microscopic changes of structure which mediate between the past occurrence and the present changed response. In the case of living organisms, practically everything that is distinctive both of their physical and of their mental behavior is bound up with this persistent influence of the past. Further, speaking broadly, the change in response is usually of a kind that is biologically advantageous to the organism. Following a suggestion derived from Semen, Dynam, Leipzig, 1904, second edition, 1908, English translation, Alan Unwin, 1921, Dynemis and Empfindungen, Leipzig, 1909, we will give the name of mnemic phenomena to those responses of an organism which, so far as hitherto observed facts are concerned, can only be brought under causal laws by including past occurrences in the history of the organism as part of the causes of the present response. I do not mean merely what would always be the case that past occurrences are part of a chain of causes leading to the present event. I mean that, in attempting to state the proximate cause of the present event, some past event or events must be included, unless we take refuge in hypothetical modifications of brain structure. For example, you smell peat smoke, and you recall some occasion when you smelt it before. The cause of your recollection, so far as hitherto observable phenomena are concerned, consists both of the peat smoke, present stimulus, and of the former occasion, past experience. The same stimulus will not produce the same recollection in another man who did not share your former experience, although the former experience left no observable traces in the structure of the brain. According to the maxim same cause, same effect, we cannot therefore regard the peat smoke alone as the cause of your recollection, since it does not have the same effect in other cases. The cause of your recollection must be both the peat smoke and the past occurrence. Accordingly, your recollection is an instance of what we are calling mnemic phenomena. Before going further, it will be well to give illustrations of different classes of mnemic phenomena. A. Acquired habits. In Lecture 2 we saw how animals can learn by experience how to get out of cages or mazes, or perform other actions which are useful to them but not provided for by their instincts alone. A cat which is put into a cage of which it has had experience behaves differently from the way in which it behaved at first. We can easily invent hypotheses, which are quite likely to be true, as to connections in the brain caused by past experience, and themselves causing the different response. But the observable fact is that the stimulus of being in the cage produces differing results with repetition, and that the ascertainable cause of the cat's behavior is not merely the cage and its own ascertainable organization, but also its past history in regard to the cage. From our present point of view, the matter is independent of the question whether the cat's behavior is due to some mental fact called knowledge, or displays a merely bodily habit. Our habitual knowledge is not always in our minds, but is called up by the appropriate stimuli. If we are asked what is the capital of France, we answer Paris, because of past experience. The past experience is as essential as the present question in the causation of our response. Thus all our habitual knowledge consists of acquired habits, and comes under the head of mnemic phenomena. b. Images. I shall have much to say about images in a later lecture. For the present I am merely concerned with them insofar as they are copies of past sensations. When you hear New York spoken of, some image probably comes into your mind, either of the place itself, if you have been there, or of some picture of it, if you have not. The image is due to your past experience, as well as to the present stimulus of the words New York. Similarly, the images you have in dreams are all dependent upon your past experience, as well as upon the present stimulus to dreaming. It is generally believed that all images, in their simpler parts, are copies of sensations. If so, their mnemic character is evident. This is important, not only on its own account, but also because, as we shall see later, images play an essential part in what is called thinking. c. Association. The broad fact of association, on the mental side, is that when we experience something which we have experienced before, it tends to call up the context of the former experience. The smell of peat smoke recalling a former scene is an instance which we discussed a moment ago. This is obviously a mnemic phenomenon. There is also a more purely physical association, which is indistinguishable from physical habit. This is the kind studied by Mr. Thorndike in animals, where a certain stimulus is associated with a certain act. This is the sort which is taught to soldiers in drilling, for example. In such a case there need not be anything mental, but merely a habit of the body. There is no essential distinction between association and habit, and the observations which we made concerning habit as a mnemic phenomenon are equally applicable to association. d. Non-sensational elements in perception. When we perceive any object of a familiar kind, much of what appears subjectively to be immediately given is really derived from past experience. When we see an object, say a penny, we seem to be aware of its real shape. We have the impression of something circular, not of something elliptical. In learning to draw, it is necessary to acquire the art of representing things according to the sensation, not according to the perception. And the visual appearance is filled out with feeling of what the object would be like to touch, and so on. This filling out and supplying of the real shape and so on consists of the most usual correlates of the sensational core in our perception. It may happen that, in the particular case, the real correlates are unusual. For example, if what we are seeing is a carpet made to look like tiles. If so, the non-sensational part of our perception will be illusory, that is, it will supply qualities which the object in question does not in fact have. But as a rule objects do have the qualities added by perception, which is to be expected, since experience of what is usual is the cause of the addition. If our experience had been different, we should not fill out sensation in the same way, except in so far as the filling out is instinctive, not acquired. It would seem that, in man, all that makes up space perception, including the correlation of sight and touch and so on, is almost entirely acquired. In that case there is a large mnemic element in all the common perceptions by means of which we handle common objects. And, to take another kind of instance, imagine what our astonishment would be if we were to hear a cat bark or a dog mew. This emotion would be dependent upon past experience, and would therefore be a mnemic phenomenon according to the definition. Memory is knowledge. The kind of memory of which I am now speaking is definite knowledge of some past event in one's own experience. From time to time we remember things that have happened to us, because something in the present reminds us of them. Exactly the same present fact would not call up the same memory if our past experience had been different. Thus our remembering is caused by 1. The present stimulus, 2. The past occurrence. It is therefore a mnemic phenomenon according to our definition. A definition of mnemic phenomena which did not include memory would, of course, be a bad one. The point of the definition is not that it includes memory, but that it includes it as one of a class of phenomena which embrace all that is characteristic in the subject matter of psychology. Experience. The word experience is often used very vaguely. James, as we saw, uses it to cover the whole primal stuff of the world, but this usage seems objectionable, since, in a purely physical world, things would happen without there being any experience. It is only mnemic phenomena that embody experience. We may say that an animal experiences an occurrence when this occurrence modifies the animal's subsequent behavior, that is when it is the mnemic portion of the cause of future occurrences in the animal's life. The burnt child that fears the fire has experienced the fire, whereas a stick that has been thrown on and taken off again has not experienced anything, since it offers no more resistance than before to being thrown on. The essence of experience is the modification of behavior produced by what is experienced. We might, in fact, define one chain of experience, or one biography, as a series of occurrences linked by mnemic causation. I think it is this characteristic, more than any other, that distinguishes sciences dealing with living organisms from physics. The best writer on mnemic phenomena known to me is Richard Semon, the fundamental part of whose theory I shall endeavor to summarize before going further. When an organism, either animal or a plant, is subjected to a stimulus, producing in it some state of excitement, the removal of the stimulus allows it to return to a condition of equilibrium. But the new state of equilibrium is different from the old, as may be seen by the change in capacity for reaction. The state of equilibrium before the stimulus may be called the primary indifference state, that after the cessation of the stimulus, the secondary indifference state. We define the engraphic effect of a stimulus as the effect in making a difference between the primary and secondary indifference states, and this difference itself we define as the engram due to the stimulus. Mnemic phenomena are defined as those due to engrams in animals. They are specially associated with the nervous system, but not exclusively, even in man. When two stimuli occur together, one of them, occurring afterwards, may call out the reaction for the other also. We call this an ekphoric influence, and stimuli having this character are called ekphoric stimuli. In such a case we call the engrams of the two stimuli associated. All simultaneously generated engrams are associated. There is also association of successively aroused engrams, though this is reducible to simultaneous association. In fact, it is not an isolated stimulus that leaves an engram, but the totality of the stimuli at any moment. Consequently, any portion of this totality tends, if it recurs, to arouse the whole reaction which was aroused before. Semon holds that engrams can be inherited, and that an animal's innate habits may be due to the experience of its ancestors. On this subject he refers to Samuel Butler. Semon formulates two mnemic principles. The first, or law of engraphy, is as follows: all simultaneous excitements in an organism form a connected simultaneous excitement complex, which as such works engraphically, that is leaves behind a connected engram complex, which insofar forms a whole. Dynemis Dungeon, p. 146. The second mnemic principle, or law of ekphory, is as follows: the partial return of the energetic situation which formerly worked engraphically operates ekphorically on a simultaneous engram complex, Ib. p. 173. These two laws together represent in part a hypothesis, the engram, and in part an observable fact. The observable fact is that, when a certain complex of stimuli has originally caused a certain complex of reactions, the recurrence of part of the stimuli tends to cause the recurrence of the whole of the reactions. Simon's applications of his fundamental ideas in various directions are interesting and ingenious. Some of them will concern us later, but for the present it is the fundamental character of mnemic phenomena that is in question. Page 64.